Welcome back to Decentralized Radio, your one-stop shop for education on how you can take back control of your health and your wealth and live outside of the centralized systems that are plaguing our society. We're hosting industry experts every Tuesday live and also releasing podcasts Friday morning.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Decentralized Radio. I'm honored to be here with Kevin from Perennial Pastures. How you doing, my man?
I'm good. How are you?
Enjoying a nice cup of Joe?
Yes, sir.
I love it. No,
Got
and
my
the other,
mycelium mushroom cup here.
I love it. No, that's
A few different
fantastic. For
types
anyone
of
that's,
fun guys on there.
I have a shirt that actually says "Fun Guy" on it, and it's just like a
Right.
picture of a mushroom.
Sure.
But the other thing I just wanted to get out of the way for anyone that is watching with us on YouTube or anyone that's watching video is that Kevin here has sporting a sweet mustache. I am envious. And I know you probably get that a lot, so I'm not trying to harp on it too much, but I cannot for the life of me grow one. So I'm a huge, not only can you pull it off, but it's nice and full. Because I know a lot of people that can grow one, but it doesn't fit the face, and you fit it very well. But I think it goes hand in hand with sort of your aesthetic there on the ranch, which is really great. But you have a very, very, very cool story about getting into regenerative ag. So I kind of want to give you the floor for a few minutes to sort of take us back to how it all started for you. I know you have a sort of athletic background that led you to sort of where you are. As far as like looking at ancestral living. So I'd love to just sort of get your story, because everyone we've had on the podcast that we talk about this topic with, they come to it through one means or another. And so I'd love for you to sort of lay out yours for our audience.
For sure. Yeah. So as you said, Ryan, and thanks for all the intro and kind words. And I wish my wife loved my mustache as much as you, but that's a whole nother story. First generation rancher. I was born here in Southern California. I'm a third generation on one side of the family, second generation Californian on another. So my roots go pretty deep back here in California. But I was born in the city. I was born in Los Angeles and grew up there and went to school in downtown Los Angeles, all boys Catholic Jesuit school called Loyola High School, St. Ignatius Loyola, and then went to University of San Diego to play baseball there on a baseball scholarship. And that was really my passion ever since t-ball growing up was baseball, and I wanted to be a professional baseball player my whole life. I made it to a good level. We had a really good D1 team at University of San Diego, and I played with a lot of former big leaguers in the Cape Cod Baseball League, which is out of Massachusetts, and even a lot of my former teammates at USD went on to play in the big leagues. I played with Chris Bryant, who's former MVP of the league out of Chicago. Now he's playing for the Rockies. And I also played, my brother played in the big leagues too. So we come from kind of a deep family lineage of athletes. And again, that was really my identity. But during college, I had a major shift. I think it was always there for me. Growing up as a kid in Southern California, I was lucky to be able to go to the Eastern Sierras and get a lot of access to the outdoors. And I always kind of felt home at nature. My family took a lot of vacations to lakes and mountains. And California is a beautiful place to grow up. You can be surfing in the morning and snowboarding, in the afternoon in some locations. So that was always a part of who I was. And then when I found the paleo diet as an athlete, it sent me down this path of investigating our food system and trying to fuel myself with the highest nutrient dense foods as possible to fuel my athletic performance. Little did I know that that was going to lead into a whole career of regenerative agriculture. It was really the start of it, the paleo diet book, and looking how we ate evolutionarily and how we ate as our paleo ancestors did, and it just kind of put me down a rabbit hole. And when my baseball career came to an end, I had a 95-mile-an-hour fastball hit me here on my left hand, and I had a season-ending injury my junior year, and it really put me down a whole path of kind of rethinking what I wanted to do with my life. And so I didn't know it at the time, but God was calling me to come back to to the land. And so it took me about a year after college. I worked one job in software sales where I was able to work for a company that went public when we were there. It was an amazing tech company called ServiceNow, and learned a little bit about software, learned a little bit about sales from some really great sales guys. So that was a nice experience coming out of college because sales is a really good skill. And I also got a business degree when I was at University of San Diego playing baseball there and ended up graduating. I got hurt my junior year, but then I went on for a couple of years after that to get my degree. And so graduated with the degree, worked that 1 year in software sales, and then was lucky enough to get some stock options there and put a little nest egg away and got married right out of college too. To my wife Dina, and now we have 2 kids and we live here in San Marcos. So it was a great start, to this whole journey. And I really, I guess, started with gardening and permaculture, and then was trying to figure out how I could scale up permaculture, and worked a little bit with Mark Shepard, who was a guy who was really scaling up permaculture and agroforestry systems, and then worked with Roger Savory, who's Alan Savory's son. And I guess I was asking myself really how could you keep maximizing the impact of this regenerative space, and really landed on ranching as I think one of the biggest levers that we can pull as a species to massively transform our soil surface and get water vapor out of the atmosphere and back down into the soil reservoir. And so I've been kind of on that path ever since 2013. I took my first PDC then in 2013, and here we are, close to 10 years later. And now I'm managing 16,000 acres, got a company called Perennial Pastures, and we sell D2C to a great customer base here in Southern California, but also nationwide. And so I've just been very blessed to have a good journey in this space, and worked my butt off to get here. And we got a great team at Perennial, and I'm very lucky to be where we're at right now.
No, it's truly fantastic. I think you're one of the people in the space that is creating real systemic change on a high level, because it's going to take a lot of effort. I mean, we've had quite a few ranchers on the podcast, and it's not an easy endeavor by any means. I've personally looked into various things. We're going to be talking to RC Carter sometime in the next couple months as well. We met up with him a couple times up in Wyoming when we were kind of doing our tour interviews, and it's like you really need to love the lifestyle and the mission, I think, to make it as effective as it can be. And like you mentioned, a lot of good things earlier about helping bring down the water vapor and things like that, that's sort of holding this heat that a lot of people in the mainstream like to talk about when it comes to climate change. And we had Dr. Frank Mittlener on the podcast. Probably butchered his last name. I always do. But
No, I know
we were
who you're
talking about,
talking about, though. Yeah.
yeah, we talked a lot about methane emissions, and it's a really interesting dive. And I think what's fascinating to me is less so what we know to be true, as in you and me, and more so what people think to be true, but is actually not the full story. And so I'd sort of love to dive in, and maybe we can kind of go back a little bit, back to 2021, sort of in the heat of the pandemic and things, when you were looking at these options, because the more people I've met in this space, there's this sort of like convergence of like people that worked in tech going into something like this. We had the guy who created Masa Chips on was one of our earlier podcasts, who used to work in tech and saw this opening in the space to sort of bridge these gaps with health and the health crisis. But what was sort of your story back in 21 as you're coming out? There's one thing to like look into the paleo community. We spoke to Rob Wolf, for example, for a health reasons, and I relate to that one personally. But it's a total other mission to be like, I found this thing, it's great, but I want to do this thing, which is definitely a bridge of that, which would be regenerative ag, but is a completely different endeavor. What was that leap for you in mindset of like, I want to take this? You mentioned taking it to the next level, but I'd love for you to sort of break down that process, because it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So, how to start a ranch, how to go from like gardening and permaculture to more broad scale ranching. It is a big jump, and you can't do it all yourself. You got to work with other folks. one of my biggest strengths in life is I'm not afraid to go up to the best in the business and sort of offer myself up to them in any way possible and try to create value for them. A lot of gurus and pioneers, especially early on in this movement, lack a lot of structure and business skills to kind of uh, help better create value in the marketplace. So that's what I did early on, working with Mark Shepard and Roger Savory, really on the business development side and the sales side. So, get a skill and know what you're good at and hone that in. And my early on in my career was raising capital and business development. And so ranching is a pretty capital intensive business. So you got to be able to be realistic about that. And if you could learn how to raise capital, it certainly opens up a lot of doors. There's a lot of capital now and different groups that have formed, whether it's Harvest Returns or Mad Ag or Iroquois Valley Farms. There's a lot of different groups that are focusing on financing regenerative agriculture now. So if you can have enough experience, cut your teeth on something and then get the confidence enough to go out and raise some capital and start out with leasing land would be my recommendation. Um, it's hard, especially in California, to go out and buy a ranch. It's probably not your best use of capital. Go and lease the land and just get the minimal infrastructure you need up to start really doing some higher density grazing and water and wires often where we tell people to start with the infrastructure on their land. It's relatively low risk, especially when you're on leased land. And then just know your market. Whether you're in Indiana or Wyoming or California, know what your market is and how to access it as best you can, and you utilize the most you know the utilize the attributes of your area or the strengths of your area. So if you're in a rural area, you might be able to get labor at a lower cost or materials at a lower cost. In our area in California, you can fall out of bed and sell some beef sticks to a customer because we're surrounded by 20 million people. So um, yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, but if you kind of take it in a methodical approach and do the hard work and put the work in, it certainly keeps building upon itself. And you're probably going to have some failures. My biggest teacher in life, has been failure of previous businesses. So here I am, version 3.0, and feel like we've really hit it on the head this time, and we've got a great team and a good investor base and a really solid plan moving forward. And we've done our homework. We know who's doing what in the industry and how they're doing it and how they're succeeding. And then we've also studied those that have gone before us. And that's the nice thing about where we're at today in the movement is folks have gone before us and have been bold, and maybe they failed or maybe they succeeded. So there's a lot of learning opportunities that are out there for us. You don't have to recreate the wheel. And then it's on us and our generation to make it better too. With the pioneers that have gone before us, they've taught us a lot, but there's always other things that you can do to make things better, whether it's on the genetic side of things or the marketing side of things. So we're putting all those pieces together, we think, with Perennial Pastures and Landscape Function Management, our ranch management entity, and we think we got some good years ahead of us here.
If you're a health conscious food consumer who's also very active, you know how big of a struggle it is to find a bar that is both convenient and nutrient dense. That's why I was so excited when I discovered the Alpa Bar. The Alpa Bar is a meat based bar that contains only simple ingredients: 100% grass fed beef, tallow, and honey, and is both nutrient dense and convenient, and packs a caloric punch of over 300 calories. For me, this was a game changer and is now the go to snack and fuel source I use when I'm hiking, camping, hunting, skiing, or doing anything in the outdoors and I don't have the resources to cook a full meal. The Alpa Bar is made proudly in Colorado and only uses locally sourced meat. JJ and Rob are also extremely based and accept Bitcoin for payment. I highly recommend you check out the Alpa Bar for any time you need a nutrient dense and convenient snack on the go. Check them out at alpa.com and use code DRadio5 at checkout to get a 5% discount. And if you pay in Bitcoin, you can get an additional discount on top of that. That's eataupa.com and use code DRadio5 at checkout.
Yeah, I'm pretty positive about how the way things are moving in the general space. That was one thing I wanted to ask you is like since you started or since you started looking into things to now, how have you viewed the movement as a whole amongst like the farming community and the ranching community? Because that's part of the not necessarily the struggle, but part of the task is like helping bring people that are interested on board and having those conversations to get more and more people into it, because it's going to take, I mean, it's a collective effort. So no one person's going to do it alone. So I'd love to see how like that evolution's like happened in your mind and just like what you view the state of the community is.
Yeah, I still don't think we've jumped the chasm, so to speak. There's this, innovation curve that occurs in any kind of new field, and you have your pioneers and your early adopters, and then between your early adopters and your early majority, there's like this chasm that you have to jump before it starts hockey sticking up. So I still think we're in the early adoption phase. Clearly, like grass-fed, grass-finished meat, I think is only still 6 to 8% of the overall beef industry, and so regenerative is probably even a smaller portion of that. But you're seeing certifications develop. We're part of Regenified, which is owned by Gabe Brown and his business partners, and we're super excited to be a part of that organization. And it helps us codify kind of what the industry is, what it looks like, and how we progress in it. Um, so yeah, I think you're seeing a lot of interest in it. The From what I heard from my friends who attended the Natural Products Food Expo here in Anaheim this year, which is the largest collection of organic and natural food businesses, I think in the country. It's bigger than, they have one called Expo East on the East Coast, but I think it's bigger than that one. And regenerative was the talk of the conference this year. And so it's good. It's good to see this. Like, it needs to happen. I think regenerative is here to stay. Unlike organic, which kind of got co-opted by the USDA and was more of a do less harm approach, regenerative's prerogative is regeneration, which inherently is do more, to work with nature and build a system rather than do less harm. And so I think at its core, it's off to a better start because it requires action and continuous action, and you can always be getting better. So that's the fun part of it for me is I think we're still at the early stage, and where are we going to be in 10 years, 20 years? And I'm 36 years old, and it's exciting to be at this point, to have learned from the folks that I've learned from, and to see where the industry is at. And again, I still think we're at the infancy of the movement, but it's got so much more to go. And I hope that, it can become the majority production system in the country, because I think it's really going to solve so many issues that we have today. So, how do we bring people along in that? I think it's just having successful businesses. If government can get out of the way and allow us to create value freely within the marketplace, I think these regenerative businesses will rise to the top because they create the most value all the way around from a negative externalities and a positive externalities standpoint. So we create healthy soil, we create healthy families, healthy humans, we create jobs, and we're producing something. Only 20%, I believe, of today's economy is actually involved in producing goods. 80% is services, right? So there's a lot there, I think, to latch onto, and it's not just beef, right? It's lamb, it's pork, it's chicken, it's eggs, it's other services such as agritourism, things like that. So a lot of exciting things, I think, coming up here down the pipe.
Yeah, no, it's exactly like you said. It's like we're sort of just like, it's sort of like when we have people on to talk about like quantum health or something. It's like we're just like barely scratching the itch of like what this could look like in the next coming decades. And the key is to just keep building that consistency and community and like having these conversations, because it's really exciting. Like one thing I sort of wanted to ask just briefly would be like with, because if we think about big food in like a, or big meat in like a certain context, it's like really these like handful or less than a handful of corporations handling like Tyson, like these big meat companies. So as you view it, do you see any, like what are the bottlenecks, I guess, that we face along the way? Because I think it's easier to get people on board. Like I'll have conversations with people like at the store about this stuff, and everyone's like down with the idea. I think the areas where it gets difficult is like you kind of briefly touched on like organic and greenwashing in lesser terms, and I find that to be sort of like one of the issues that I think we'll overcome. But it's sort of like managing these things. I'd love to hear your view on things like that.
For sure. Certainly, so much of our food system is still dominated by the supermarkets. You see the rise of Butcher Box, $600 million company, but I think I was listening to a podcast by their CEO the other day, and I think two to three, it's a low percentage in the single digits of people that buy food online, which tends to be oftentimes directly from the companies. So there's still this whole system in place which involves the distributor and the supermarkets, and these supermarkets have massive amounts of power and are oftentimes very consolidated, just like other areas of the industry. And so it's hard when you don't have that direct connection with your farmer or rancher to tell that story and to be very transparent. And it opens up opportunities for other folks to greenwash a lot. And so I do think that there's some of that going on in the regenerative movement today. I'm hoping the certification companies can get their arms around it. What I like about Regenified is it's a tiered system. So we've been in Regenified for 2 years now, but we're in tier one, and we can't even use the seal in tier one. To get to tier two, you have to actually regenerate 25% of your land. And so across our 16,000 acres and some of our partner ranch leases, we're working to do that. And we believe in our third year of doing this management system that we'll get to that tier two. But then you can only sit in a tier for 3 years. You have to like constantly improve. Whereas some of these other certifications, you get the seal, and oftentimes some of these folks go back after they get the seal. They have a mishap in management, or they're not doing the good practices, or even let's say they did see some general improvement from loose rotational grazing, but then they kind of hit a plateau and they're not continuing forward to where their ecosystem can be. So I think it's going to be a combination of better data on the ground. We've invested in things like satellite imagery and hyperspectral imagery to quantify our landscapes at scale. It's very hard to do on a ranch scale because there's massive soil variability. So we do have Regenified coming out to all these different spots to test our soil, but we're going a step further on top of what they do, and hopefully positively influence some of their monitoring techniques later on down the road. But we've invested with a group called Open Range Consulting to do the satellite imagery, and so satellite will fly over every week, and we can get snapshots of soil cover, ground cover, litter cover, degree of perennial grass species, all these very important factors that, down to the meter, sub-meter resolution, we can see our whole ranch, which for us just pays off in itself from a management capability, because we can know how much forage we have ahead of us in the dry season. We can know exactly how our management is occurring in real time every week. So that's huge for us as managers of large landscapes. And so I think it's going to be better tools and better data, which our generation, I think, is super onto. Like our generation, I say our generation, I'm 36. I don't know how old you are, Ryan. If you're
I'm 28, so it's,
you're right
ballpark.
there, kind of on the cusp of a
I'm on the
millennial, I
cusp.
think. I believe,
Yeah.
yeah. So our generation, we're very comfortable with this technology, and kind of we were the first generation that like when we grew up we didn't have phones, and then we got phones as we grew up, so we kind of know the analog and the digital. And so I think it's going to be on us to really tell the story better through these data principles, be more transparent. We're going maybe even to the point of having live feed cameras on the ranch daily of the cattle too. And so you just can't get that good of a story through the supermarket, and in a product that sits on the shelf. And so hopefully, we see more folks moving to online and direct to consumer. But at some point, we are going to have to fix the monopolies that we have existing in the food system. The four big packers control 80% of the packing. There's massive subsidies um, that do promote the grain system and the grain finish system. And I think if you were to put up economically the grain system versus the grass system without subsidies, grass finish by far would be the more economical solution to that. And we'd see a massive adoption of grass fed, grass finished meat, which we now know is more nutrient dense than grain finished meat, according to the data from the Bionutrient Food Association and Dan Kittredge and his team, Dr. Stefan Von Vliet. So a lot of those things I hope are all going to come together and just create like an unbeatable story. And if we can get kind of government out of the subsidies and in the same tone, like government needs to step in and perhaps enhance or enforce the antitrust laws that were put in place in this country for a good reason, I believe, to bring back a more competitive marketplace. Uh, I think all those things coming together will be good for the regenerative movement.
It's definitely a tango. That's kind of the way I've always viewed like government relationships with like private business is like it's sort of like this relationship that there needs to be some like coexistence, but you have to sort of like pull and loosen the strings in different areas to make it actually be fruitful for the majority. And we're humans, so that just hasn't played out that way always. But I think there is like definitely an involvement like in that. That's important. I'm glad you brought up that the nutrient density part, like with Stefan, because we had him on the podcast pretty early on, because he's actually or at the time he was local to me up at Utah State. I'm in Salt Lake, so he actually came
Nice.
down and we had him on. It was a really good discussion because there's like actually a pretty big difference. Like it's actually pretty dramatic, like especially even within, I'm sure you're aware of like the saturated fat like makeup is like actually quite a bit different than generic saturated fat like on a grain fed New strip. Like it's pretty dramatic. So
Yeah.
and the cool part is I think that's what makes like it brings validity to these things. I think from a land management perspective, I've always found it interesting. um I don't know if this is an area of your expertise, but I find that discussion kind of fun because we did talk about this with Stefan way back about this idea of well, actually, I kind of want to go through the different types of grazing because the most familiar kind that I am aware of is I grew up in sort of Midland, Kansas, so I knew my history teacher was like a part-time, like full-time. He always say he was a full-time rancher, part-time history teacher is the way he would put it.
Nice. Nice.
But he definitely did like the practice of like continuous grazing of just sort of like
Yeah.
throwing animals out there. So I'd love to get into sort of the different types of grazing from a standardized view and sort of what makes what you're doing more beneficial for the ground and the grass species and just the plane of nature. And also I'd love to get into more about how we measure these things because you sort of mentioned those components that you use, but it's cool to see measurable change.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people, when they think about these things, it's like, oh man, we've been decimating the soil with monocropping for so long. It's like you sort of have this bleak output, but the world, just like our health, is actually quite resilient if you give it the right stimuluses, like you talked
Yeah.
about. So I'll
Yeah.
hand that over to you because it's a really interesting topic.
Yeah. No, that's a cool point and cool direction to go in. So continuous grazing is you just kind of let the cows out, you let them graze where they want to graze, and they kind of have free access to the whole ranch. So what happens is you end up overgrazing some species of plants and over resting other species of plants. The cows go for the plants that they like to eat, and then they'll eat those. And overgrazing is a function of time, not length. So, um, timing means if you graze a plant and then you come back and graze it before it's been regrown or fully recovered, that's overgrazing. A lot of people say overgrazing is having too many cows in an area is overgrazing. Well, again, if they're there for a very short period of time, they harvest everything, knock some good litter down to the ground, and you don't come back to that area for a year, that's really where I think the best grazers in the world are operating, is this high density grazing realm. So that's, you got continuous grazing, and then high intensity, high density, short duration grazing on the other side of the spectrum. Then in the middle, you kind of have this, what I like to call loose rotational grazing, or still very selective rotational, where some folks still have, call it 10 pastures, 20 pastures, big cells. Now you get some benefit from that because you are resting some of those grasses that you were previously grazed in paddocks, earlier on in the year, but you still have this overgrazing and overresting phenomenon that's happening because the animals aren't tight enough to graze non-selectively. A non-selective graze is when they come in and there's so much competition they just head everything down. And this is what the bison or wildebeest in Africa, but bison here. I mean, we had much larger herds of bison here than the Africans do, I believe, in the African savannas. I think maybe if you were actually to look at probably the Sahara when that was grassland back in the day, there's probably some massive herds there. But 1 million, 2 million, bison and herds here in North America, we just don't have any ecological memory for that anymore. The same that we don't have for what the landscapes used to look like when beavers were prevalent here. So these massive keystone species are very they're much less existent than they were, not too long ago, right? So I think the key is to mimic nature, and in doing that, this high intensity, high density, short duration grazing periods with those are the differences really, is like continuous grazing, they get to go where they want. High density grazing, we control the movements either through herding or electric polywire fence or high tensile fence. And so those are kind of the two paradigms with this loose rotational grazing in the middle.
Yeah, I find it really interesting because what you said too is like it's very human nature if you think about it. When you were mentioning, like, if you just leave the cows out to do what they want, they'll go graze on the things that they want all the time, and you'll get sort of this overgrazing activity. And you can kind of see this. I see it in like house pets. They get used to a certain treat or whatever, and it sort of removes the natural aspect out a little bit. And so when you had land like this that, like you said, we've lost the ecological memory of, and we have all these issues as a subsequent byproduct, we sort of have to. I love how you put it with like mimicking sort of like how bison would have moved through something like that, because that's as close as we're going to get in the current moment, because we just don't have the same like structure of things that were. And what's nuts is that's only a couple hundred years ago that things like this were totally the opposite of what they are now. One thing that's I've always found interesting about the results of doing this with soil is you actually improve the water retention of soil. I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit, because it's a super important aspect. Like, as we've mistreated our environment, we've actually made it more difficult for the soil to hold water, and that causes a whole bunch of other problems that I think don't get talked about enough, because that creates a huge difference in general. This podcast is brought to you by our lead sponsor, EMR Tech. EMR Tech manufactures high quality, high powered red light therapy devices. In my opinion, red and infrared light are two of the biggest nutrient deficiencies in our modern society due to our indoor lifestyles. Red light therapy devices, like the ones from EMR Tech, can help combat that by providing high powered red light while being indoors. I personally use mine every morning and every evening. Red and near infrared light is extremely beneficial for energy production in our body because it boosts mitochondrial function and penetrates deep into the cell. It is also extremely beneficial for skin health, eye health, as well as our circadian rhythms. And this is actually pretty much why I bought everyone in my family an EMR Tech red light therapy device for Christmas. EMR Tech panels are low flicker, low EMF, and use targeted wavelengths such as 830 and 630 nanometers, amongst others, to get extremely effective results. For more information, go to emrtech.com and use our code DRadio10 for 10% off your order. That's emrtek.com with our code DRadio, DRADIO 10 to save at checkout.
For sure. And I think a lot of people don't know the potential water holding capacity of truly healthy soil. And if you go a bit further north than you and in the Plains region, still up in North Dakota at Brown Ranch, that's the best I've seen in the world. They've improved their soil over 20 years of doing, high density grazing and no-till cover cropping, and they can sink in. I think it's 18 inches in a 24-hour period. I might be actually low on that number, but I like to be lower on these estimates than higher. But that's pretty much the upper limits of like what they might even get in their craziest gnarly storms. So if you put that in context here in California, I think we had 2 or 3 inches in a few hours here this year, and we saw massive flooding in some of our coastal regions, and so FEMA, to the point where FEMA has now had to come in and called it a disaster area, and now we get like breaks on filing our taxes on time as a county and all these things, and folks are receiving a lot of benefits. But like, look at the expense that the federal government is having to go through to help these folks out, which federal government's already spending crazy amounts of money on other things. So another thing that they have to spend money on, when through land management practices, if we had the whole watershed dialed in. Now, it's hard in the urban areas, but there's solutions in the urban areas too, with curb cutting and planting water gardens and things like that, and harvesting water off roofs. And that was my previous career. But if we can do it on our watershed scale at the ranches and higher up, we should see massive amounts. So if you apply Gabe Brown's infiltration rates to San Diego County, now he's got different plains soils, but I think we could get upwards, into the 5-10 inches of rain in a 24-hour period, as our potential in our soils. And that's right around our max storms as well. So it's pretty important, again, especially in the West, in California, as we look at the Ogallala Aquifer starting to diminish. And here in California, the long-term predictions for the Sierra snowpack and the Colorado River snowpack do not look good. And we get, I believe it's 80% of our water from the Colorado River, and another 20% from the Delta, which is the Sierra snowpack melt. So if we can get that water back down, sinking into the groundwater table, and then storing in soil reservoirs, as Walter Yenny likes to say, if he might be another good guy for you guys to get on the podcast. He's a CSIRO microbiologist, and he's the guy that's taught me a lot about this whole water vapor conversation, and really how that's the main driver to the thermodynamics of the planet. And so if we can get water back down on the ground where it belongs, then the cooling aspect, or the climate, just becomes more stable. I don't think anybody, whether you believe in climate change or not, and anthropogenic or whatever, nobody can can deny that we've had a massive amount of soil loss, and so that leads to less in soil capability to store water, which means more of that water is going to evaporate off bare ground and go into the atmosphere. And so everybody's talking about carbon, carbon, carbon. Well, really, the main driver is water vapor. And even if we get carbon back down in, which is a byproduct of this management as well, the oceans are going to go, okay, thank you. And they're going to off gas all the carbon that they've brought in, because as we've been releasing carbon off the land, the ocean's been bringing that in to try to balance. And then that leads to higher ocean temperatures and more ocean acidification. So we can start healing the oceans by better land management, but then we're not going to stabilize the carbon dynamics for a while on this planet. So we got to start looking at water vapor, but that's not the sexy conversation, you know. So why are people going to be talking about that, especially when it takes, you know, 2 to 10 years, 3 to 10 years to actually fully implement, depending upon what type of ecosystem you're, ranching or farming in. So those are, my thoughts on that whole conversation.
No, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that was the only thing I was even going to ask you is like with the timelines of like all these things, like we hear all these climate numbers of like by decade blah, which I think already has been kind of off in some ways. But when you look at the long term, it's not a quick fix to turn around land, and everywhere's a little bit different. Like, how do you view like the time scale of being able to do this on like a large enough means? Actually, the aquifer thing is very interesting in and of itself, because I mean they deal with aquifers to water plants in the Midwest, and those I was hearing about those things being emptied when I was in middle school in '08. So
Right.
it's been a long discussion, and there's been certain areas around there going through drought issues throughout the summers, and there's just a lot of moving parts. So on a time scale, how much do you think is manageable in the next like uh, 10, 20 years as you see the movement progressing to where we can get to a good spot? Because it takes a while to undo a lot of damage.
Yeah. Well, that's the nice thing, is you can turn soil around pretty quickly, and we can get the soil covered fairly quickly. Certainly, in a cropping scenario, we can just adopt cover crops as a standard practice and get that soil covered and more armor on there. Then, if we could introduce grazing, which is a little bit more technical, into those cropping fields, then that's when we really start to see the benefits. Gabe Brown kind of hit a plateau with just no-till and cover cropping, and then he hockey sticked when he started doing high density grazing in his cropping fields. And then when it comes to ranching, I mean, that's why I love ranching and looking at this field, because you get a couple of these excuse me, large producers in these areas in the Brittle West, um, and you could have some massive change, where you get some of these anchor ranches that are hundreds of thousands of acres or even millions of acres, and you could make some pretty big dents in microclimates in certain areas. And then all you got to do is start putting, one, two, three of these really large ranches together in an area, and I think you can start to really look at influencing local weather patterns. And they're seeing this now in the Chihuahuan Desert. Um, in that whole state, it's the largest state in Mexico, but Mexico is probably leading the world in terms of regenerative ranching. They probably have the largest nucleus of regenerative ranchers there in that state. And I've been to that state, and I've been to a Tier 5 regenerified ranch in that state, Las Caretas Ranch, and Eduardo and his team down there are doing amazing things with that operation. And so, yeah, I'm very hopeful that we can very quickly regenerate this planet, with just with better management. When you start looking at some of the even bigger areas like Australia, they have ranches that are bigger than some of our states, So if you look at that country, that could be pretty quick over there. If you got 10 of the largest ranchers to start doing this, you could really shift the dynamics in countries like that. Now, other countries where it's more smaller farms, you're just going to have a better, call it culture acceleration. It's got to become part of the culture faster there, because you have to convince more people for the land bases to change in those areas. Like I'm thinking about Europe, tons of small farms and ranches, there. And so that's just going to have to be a cultural thing. But they're more sort of let's call it kind of culture community orientated anyways. So as soon as you got massive adoption of that early stage and you jump the chasm there, things would change there pretty quickly. Whereas in areas like the Western US or Australia, you'd probably need some of these larger producers to get on board. Which the nice thing too is it's more profitable. We know that now. So economics are kind of I think where we start with this thing because money talks and people want to make more money. So
No, no,
excuse
that's
me.
true. I was just gonna say that. Yeah, money talks. If you can get people in on like an economic level, that starts turning some ears. So turning some heads. And yeah, that's definitely it is interesting because it's like I'm always amazed at how fast things turn around. I mean, I always point people to like watching some sort of like post-apocalyptic movie or something, and just watch how fast nature reclaims a cityscape, and it's like not a long time at all. So if we just put in the right inputs, like things will happen. So I'm
We have
pretty
no
positive going
excuses. I
forward.
got a good buddy, Enrique Guerrero, and he regenerated a mine in Mexico, and he took it from bare rock to grassland, in a relatively short amount of time. Now he did a high input deal, which was essentially a portable feedlot where he fed in these very small grids across the whole rocky outcropping. It was an open pit mine, but it's amazing what he was able to do and get roots to grow again. And he's just following biological processes of inoculating the rocks with moisture and fungi and then lichen, and then you get enough for seeds to germinate on there, and it's amazing. I can send those photos through to you
That'd
for
be
a link in
awesome.
the show notes so you can, if he's done it on bare rock, and we now know
Yeah,
we can do this portable feedlot in the desert too, and we're looking to maybe do this here in California. We have the Anza Borrego Desert right here, which is a pretty dry desert. It gets like 2 inches of annual rainfall, and so we're looking to do this ourselves as like a finishing operation to regenerate the desert. So if we can do that and just work with biological processes, we really have no excuses to do this, at scale. I think so.
no, that's the beautiful part of it, actually. And one thing I was gonna say is I'm actually glad you brought up that Chihuahua Desert example because that's probably, like you said, one of the greatest examples of like turning things around in somewhere that maybe a generic, someone you just talked to on the street wouldn't even think of being possible. So it's just such a fundamental thing. I mean, like you said, don't reinvent the wheel. Like nature has the tools. We just have to lean into it. One thing we talked about with Stefan that you sort of tweaked my memory from was if you look at if you go to a supermarket or you go to a store and you're buying meat, minus the fact that most of it's generically raised anyways, you sort of only see three types of meat products. It's beef, pork, and chicken. And so one concept that we talked about is everyone's gotten used to this one view of like this is what food is available on a high scale, and the big meat companies have gotten really well, to a degree, they've gotten really efficient at making like massive amount of chicken or like massive amount of pork. What do you feel, or how do you feel about like multi-species grazing on land, because different animals sort of go after different sections of the plant. I know cows like tend to eat grass a certain way with their tongue. They wrap it around and like kind of pull it out.
Right.
Um, I think that's a mindset shift that would be beneficial for people to take, is like, eating other animals than just what we've grown up, here in the US of like beef, pork, chicken. Because that's what I mean, nature's super diverse, and that's what
Yeah.
we're sort of trying to emulate. So I'd love to
Yeah.
hear like different angles you've heard people taking with that, because that's a whole other topic.
Yeah. Certainly from the health aspect, I think getting different types of proteins allows you to get access to different phytochemicals and things that are within nature. Where, like you said, sheep and goats are better browsers, so they're maybe going to eat more of the shrubbery, which has different polyphenols and secondary compounds in it than just maybe grass and flower species. But and then from a production standpoint, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of benefits to that too because all these animals digest a little bit differently. They're all ruminants, but um, they're going to have different kind of microbiome structures and microbiome genetic diversity that'll be good for the soil through their poop and urine and things like that. So We're looking at it. I'd love to do some multi-species, either with sheep or goats, kind of in with the cows. It adds another complexity to the management, so we're just trying to get the cattle down first because we know we can be good at that. And then once we've uh, gotten sufficient, enough in that, I'd like to maybe add a few more layers. We are currently selling lamb right now, which has been great, and it's been a fun go at the farmers markets. We're at 16 farmers markets, so it's been fun to engage our customer base on that. It's tier 5 regenified lamb too, out of the Central Valley here in California, farm there called O'Crawley Farms, which is an regenerative almond farm. They graze sheep in between their orchards. So beautiful land and a really cool silvopasture system. So we're excited to be selling that lamb at the market because I'm sure it's very nutrient dense. We haven't tested it yet, but I bet it ranks up there pretty high. So yeah, I just think a lot of potential there to get more uh, diversity of the microbiome in the fields and different kind of grazing patterns and regimes and bite structures, and then on the health side, starting to work in different cuts. And yeah, I mean, if you could have a diet of beef, lamb, pork, chicken, certainly maybe some bison, some elk, some wild game in there, some fish, and raw milk. I think you're looking at a pretty solid, good animal based, and then mix in some other super interesting herbs and fruits and veggies, and I think you're gonna live a long time.
Pretty much just described my entire diet, so that I don't have to get into that too much. But no, I've actually always been a fan of goat, which isn't like a super like American popularized food, but I think it's actually from like a world consumer view, it's like one of the most consumed meats, like especially like in the
Yeah.
Middle East and stuff, tons of goat,
I think it
and
is
it's
the
great.
most in the world, I want to say.
Yeah, I
Maybe
think you
chicken
might be right.
surpassed that now just because the US eats so much freaking chicken, but
Yeah.
I think maybe globally goat is that would be a good trivia question for sure.
Yeah, no, and I'm a big fan. I always tell people like goat is pretty much like lean lamb. Like if you're gonna like ribs are freaking fantastic if you can get your hands
Yeah,
on them. But yeah, lamb's sort of one of the. I always call lamb like salmon of the land because it has such a high. If you get some really high quality lamb, like it has pretty high omega threes. Like it's
that's
pretty
cool.
gnarly actually how much DHA is in it. And as you know, like the DHA is markedly higher in grass fed beef versus grain fed. Like it's almost insane. It's pretty
Yeah.
interesting. Like I sort of love your thoughts just on this concept because we've had discussions around like there's sort of different camps as far as like what is better. I guess we should start here just briefly. We mentioned earlier like grass fed, and then you mentioned regenerative in like a different capacity. What's the difference between the two? Because
Right.
those are definitely conflated for sure.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Wyoming Based, my new apparel company that is focused on providing high quality natural fiber based products using 100% US supply chains. Our first two products, the 100% wool everyday beanie and 100% wool rib sweater, are proudly made right here in Wyoming using local wool. The wool is low itch, high quality, and durable, naturally antimicrobial, and way better for your health and the health of the planet. If you want to support a local US brand and are tired of supporting woke outdoors companies that shill plastics, check us out at wyomingbase.com and pre-order your sweater and beanie today.
Well, you could be grass fed, grass finished, and not regenerative, So um, you could practice continuous grazing or loose rotational grazing and not be doing your best to regenerate the land. So, and then there's the notion of grass fed, grain finish, or just grass fed, and they leave out the grain finish part. The nice thing is all beef does start out its life on grass. Nothing just goes straight into a feedlot. So that's the really nice thing about beef, and I think that's where the folks like Rob Wolf and Diana Rogers are trying to get to. There's such this war on meat in general. They just want to get people to eat more meat, so they're kind of playing this role, I think, of just being an advocate of all protein, which is great, and I think that definitely needs to get played because there's world forces at play that are trying to get us all to eat bugs and have microchips in our heads and stuff. And so they're playing the role, but we know now through that research. And all right, it maybe it's not meta analysis all the way through quite yet, but you've had Dr. Stefan on the podcast. The dude's a smart dude, and I'd put him up against anybody on secondary metabolites and phytochemicals and things like that. So it's fun to see that. Um, but yeah, there's a whole continuum there, and we just got to get better at telling the story. I think certainly this nutrient density research that's coming out, if we could put the power in the hand of the consumer to like do some testing, or like my vision is like to just publish our nutrient density research on our website, and to just go like, hey, here's how we stack up against even conventional grass fed finished, like, all right, our soil, like this conventional grass fed, grass finished, like from let's say 1 to 2% organic matter soils, and here's how it stacks up to our 6% organic matter soils, and they have a diversity of like 3 different types of grass species, and we have 20 different types of grass species and flowers and forbs and all this stuff. So I think once we get to that level and our ability to like tell the story on the land, from how that's transforming to the actual product and the nutrient density, I think that's going to separate a lot of producers, because you just can't lie with that. Like there's a lot of lying, like, oh, we're grass fed, grass finish, regenerative, but it's like such a low bar and a low tier, and they're just like checking a box, And so the folks that are really about it, hopefully the cream rises to the top. I guess time will tell on that, though.
No, that's a great barrier to entry for people. I think when you can show them, like, I feel like we're in a world that's like obsessed with like show me the data for anything. Even though like there's so many issues with, I mean, so many issues with the way they collect nutrition data just for like
Yeah.
generic studies. It's like, okay, like, all right, yeah, like this almost tells me nothing. But I think like if you can show that on your website, and that's the thing that everyone wants things to be very black and white. And I think that's the world that we've grown up in, is like, this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, like for you health wise or whatever. But there's so much nuance to all of these topics. And you brought up a really good point about, especially with, if you have like 20 different types of forage that are being, gnawed on out here, you're going to have a very different profile. And this has been shown in the research by Stefan Van Fleet and others, that you'll have a very different profile. I think that you could have two really good profiles that look different based on the range of land. Like cows that are going to be grazing in Missouri are going to be different than in Wyoming or in California.
Yeah.
And that's not a thing to look down on. It's just
No.
like, if anything, it's a benefit to you in whatever sort of the climate that you're in. But it's sort of the beauty of nature in that. And that's also why I think you got to give that grain of salt when you're looking at data, because you have to have that consideration in mind. Now, regardless, I think anything that's properly regeneratively raised is going to be markedly better than anything you're going to compare it to that's on stock. But there is that nuance. So like I've seen pretty different omega ratios from like Midlands area in the Midwest compared to Wyoming. It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
But you can
Yeah.
taste that even within wild game. Like that's one thing we talked about as well, is if you hunt deer in mid-Michigan, where my family's from, I've actually found it tastes different than when we've gone hunting up in northern Utah, just because the forage is completely different. They're gnawing on scrub brush here compared to grass. And so there's just so many nuances. I find it's fun.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Yep.
But
no, 100%.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on and giving me this time. I really implore people to go check out your website. You have a lot of good resources on there, and you partner with a lot of cool ranches as well. So anywhere would you like to point people for further information? I know you're on Instagram and X and all that stuff as well.
Yeah, so just perennialpasturesranch.com, and yeah, we have the Instagram and X platforms going too. We are running a free freezer promo for those folks that live in the Southwest right now. We're trying to make it a nationwide deal, but we offer you a free freezer if you buy a whole or a half cow from us right now. So we do have that promotion running. So for any of your listeners, in the Southwest. That's a good one to do. Like it's like a $400 value, and we brand it and we personally deliver it and stack it for you. But yeah, we found that that's like the number one barrier to buying any protein in bulk, which I think, as far as self sovereignty and decentralization, that's a good way to go.
Yeah, and actually, that's sort of the argument I try to make to people that they're like, oh man, I wish I could buy like a half cow, but I don't have a freezer or whatever. And I'm like, well, if you really do the math, it's so much more affordable to buy meat in bulk than going to Kroger every day, like I did
Yeah,
for a long time.
yeah.
So that's so cool. How many South are you just doing it in Southern California, or is it any
No, we
southwestern
do
state?
like Western Arizona, and then I think we'll go as far as like maybe like Santa Barbara or San Luis Obispo. Like, look, if you buy a whole cow from us, we'll probably drive a good ways distance, probably even maybe into like Las Vegas and those areas too. Not quite Utah yet, but we
I
can
was gonna
ship
ask him.
you like we're looking at right now optimizing our shipping program for like eighths and quarters and half. So we could ship. I think Utah's in the 2 day zone. I want to say for us.
Sounds about
So
right.
yeah, we're optimizing all that right now to like just reach more people because
Mhm.
there's just not enough folks producing regeneratively right now. So we got to be able to like reach people with where they're at. So
Yeah, and we talked to AJ Richards some months ago, and I know he's been working on like creating some sort of I know he's been working on building apps and stuff to sort of connect consumers to farmers so that you can have sort of a repository, because I think that's also the other barriers. Like I know tons of people that would like go gung ho to like get some local grass fed, regenerative beef. But if they don't know where, or they don't find, I mean, I think it's pretty easy to find a farmer's market. Like any major city, you'll be finding stuff. But that's a barrier of like, oh man, how do I find a rancher? So that's really cool that you guys are doing that and making moves, because I think that's going to bring a lot more people on board. Because I feel like there's an innate yearning for this, like even within communities that aren't gung ho in here yet. It's just sort of like breaking that barrier to entry. So I'll put all that stuff in the show notes for people to, if they want to reach out in your area or anything like that. But Kevin, thank you so much for coming on. We'll have to do this
yeah,
again sometime.
thanks, Ryan. Appreciate your time, man.
Thanks. And everyone, we'll see you next time in another episode of Decentralized Radio.